Okay. So today we have presenting HTTP URL connection. That's me, and servlets with Eric Pratt.
Yep.
Cool.
Eric,
So,
are you driving, Eric?
No, I'm in my room right now. I'm on my computer, so I can present.
Awesome sauce.
I was wondering if you're going to try to present while you were driving.
that would be interesting.
That would be a sight to behold.
Yes.
No man has ever done that before.
I don't think anyone should even try it, though.
No,
in the middle of presenting, you hear screeching and crashing. You're like, oh, what happened?
It's a really bad idea.
No, it's totally bad.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, so in the course description, it calls it HTTP URL connection, but on the schedule, it calls it Android HTTP URL connection. So we're going to explore that a little bit. So basically, it extends the URL connection class, which is a way to connect to some sort of service on the internet using Java. HTTP URL connection uses the hypertext transfer protocol to accomplish this on port 80 generally. Basically, hypertext transport protocol or transfer protocol uses GET and POST, as well as a couple of other methods that we're not going to worry about in the scope of this class, to accomplish certain things like navigating between web pages, searches, and other sorts of stuff. So a GET request will request data from a given server. Requests can be cached, bookmarked, and they should never be used to transfer sensitive data because they are not encrypted at all. A GET request cannot modify server data. So you'll never see for instance, a register form on the internet that uses GET. They will always use POST. An example of a GET request in action is like a Google search. Whoops, let's go back. A Google search, navigating between web pages, that sort of thing. A POST request will send data. It cannot be cached or bookmarked, and is used for sensitive data transfers. So like if ever you've refreshed your browser and you get a notification from the browser saying, would you like to resend that? Are you sure? It may contain sensitive data. That is because you are resubmitting a POST request. So basically, HTTP URL connection enables us to use GET and POST and other HTTP requests that we're not going to worry about those using Java. Now it's demo time. So here we have HTTP URL connection demo. So basically, what this is going to do is create a URL, namely Google, searching for kittens, and we will search for kittens using Java. A URL using the URL class is created here. The connection is created here. The connection is opened. We specify that we're using GET, not any other method. GET is the default method, so this step is, strictly speaking, unnecessary, but it's good practice to specify anyway. And so this is the execute. And then we read the response here using a buffered reader and a input stream reader. And then we parse it together. Instead of using a char array or a series of characters, we use a string because we like strings. I'm just like, this is a sidebar, but like C and C++ programming with char arrays, the Mad Libs assignment that I did for one of my CS classes back when I was a CS major, caused me to forever shy away from char arrays. I just do not like them. So we have a given line that we initialize because that's good practice. Using the reader, we read the the incoming input stream, parse it together, and return it. And then we have, because we are doing a URL and a HTTP connection, we're connecting to something outside of the application. It is very important to use a try-catch block, because if there is a IO exception or a connection exception, that sort of thing, you want to be able to catch it and free up the network resources and inform the user, rather than just continuing blind. It's just good practice to do that. That is for the get. This is all for the get request. Then here it's a lot more complicated because when you're posting, you are sending the server data to either be input into a database or to use something, basically. And so we have to form our post parameters. And basically what I'm posting, the site that I'm posting to is jsonplaceholder.typeofcode.com, because it is a site that allows post requests for testing purposes, basically for this exact purpose, to demonstrate that your post request connection algorithm, however you set it up, is actually working. And so we create the post parameters according to the website's data schema. So they have a user ID, a title, an ID, a body. Then we output as a sanity check, make sure that it's looking correct. Then we do the same thing as we did before. We create the URL going to the specific location specified by the site. We make the connection. We set the request method to post. This is mandatory this time. And then we set the request property of user ID and content type so that we are able to actually post. And content type is important depending on the type of data that you're sending. In this case, we're sending JSON. And then set do output so that we can do output streams and this sort of thing. Then we do the same thing that we did before. We output the stream, get the response. This is a in case a 500 error occurs. That 500 error is a server error. A 400 class error is a not found error. So 404 means that the resource you're trying to access is not there. 500 means that the server encountered an error. Generally speaking, that means you coded something wrong. And so if the HTTP URL connection is actually happening, we read out all of this stuff. And if it's not, we tell the user that we failed. And this throws an exception, which is in a try-catch block here. So I guess let's run it and see what happens. I'm a little nervous. I did not get a chance to test this beforehand. All right, 7. Run the get demonstration. So it appears that the HTTP URL connection demo encountered an error. And we're only running into this because we put the code into a try-catch block. If we did not do this, it would have just failed and we would not have any information as to why. I'm not going to do any live debugging. Let's just run the other one, see if it works. Okay, this one does work. So in essence, this is the sanity check, the JSON that we put together to put into the to post to that particular site, and we get a response code of 201, which means that it actually happened. And this is output from the website, so we can see that it all matches, and it's all still there. So yeah, I think that's all the material I have.
Cool.
Good job, man.
Thank you. Like, I'm a little miffed that this did not work, honestly.
Well, either way, I thought it was a pretty good demonstration of what you can do just strictly through Java, just to get information from websites and whatnot, and databases.
Yep. I tried to so in CIT 336, we're building a Acme database that allows for a lot of user input, like adding categories to a database, adding products, that sort of thing. And I tried to get it so that I could use this program to add a category to the Acme database. But it looks like that is going to take a little bit more work than getting a Google search for kittens. Because it's difficult to populate a pre-existing form, is my understanding.
Right.
It's easier to just input to a JSON file.
I thought it was a good demonstration, though. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah. Let me set you to present to everyone.
Okay. Let me share this. All right. So I just have a quick few slides here. Slideshow. There we go. Okay, so I'll be talking a little bit about servlets. Servlets doing the things. Cool. So why are servlets a thing? Why are they here? Well, first, because reasons. They just are. Two, it customizes your experience when you request a web page from a server. Say, for example, you're logging into Facebook or Slack or some other website that has account information like a bank or something. You log in and it grabs your account information, and based on that, it'll build the web page for you. Those who have built HTML pages, it's static. You can't change it. What loads is just there. You can't really modify it except for with JavaScript on load. It's a static page. So a servlet basically has the role of building a web page for you, so it can customize the user experience to meet their needs. So how does it work? So basically from the client, you make a request to the server. The request goes out, the server receives it, and the server is set up to either be a web server, or if it has Tomcat running on it, it probably has a port forwarder so that it forwards you to whatever port Tomcat is running on. By default, that's 8080. Tomcat, or any kind of web container. It could be Tomcat or Glassfish, any kind of web container. So basically, the server forwards the request to the web container, and the web container uses the servlets to build the web page for you. And then after the servlet builds the content, it sends the content back to the client. So basically, the servlet is in charge of receiving requests, processing requests, and then sending those requests back. So what is a servlet? Okay, server, servlet, these are words. A servlet is defined in some kind of deployment descriptor. It's the deployment descriptor. Usually it's a web.xml file, and it defines what type of URLs use what servlets when requests are sent, and the web container can direct traffic accordingly. So the file specified, there's a file specified in the descriptor that extends HTTP servlet or servlet, some kind of class that can use the request and response. So it receives the request from the server, processes the request, and then sends the response after it processes it. Typically, it's a file that has certain requests to it. So so here's a good demonstration of that. On the left, you have a web XML, and you can see that there's a servlet tag in there, and you have your servlet name and your servlet class, and you also have servlet mapping. And under servlet mapping, you have the various URL patterns that it's looking for. So when you send a request and it has a specific URL pattern, the web container is going to say, okay, for this pattern, what servlet am I using? So it looks at the servlet name, pulls up the servlet, and says, okay, it's using this class, and it then calls whatever method on that class that you want to call, whether it's do get or do post, or even just plain old service. And I'm just going to be using service for the demonstration today as we build it. So that's the end of that. And I'm just going to do a quick demonstration. It's a fairly simple one. It's not going to be too complicated. So we're just going to start by building a web application, and it's basically going to be blank. I'm just going to call it servlets. And I'm going to be using Tomcat for this demonstration. And just pay attention to this context path. That's going to be the default path that everything loads in on. And I'm not going to use anything here. It's going to be able to work without that. Java Server Faces uses its own servlets, as was demonstrated last week by Ben, I believe, who was doing hibernation. But yeah, Java Server Faces has its own little servlet. It builds its own deployment. So we're just going to build this out. Okay, so we have just this regular welcome HTML. We're going to write over this. And we're going to build an application. This is one that I had already turned in, and I just got basic back for it. It's pretty simple. But we're just going to call this animal servlet example. And for the HTML, we're going to put it in a form. And this action for the form determines the URL that will be posted. And we're just going to have a list of animals here. Cat, goat, and we have a panda. Okay, and then we also need a button to submit it. Okay, so now we have this. We need the image files that we'll be using for our demonstration here. So I'm going to create a new folder just called images. And I have images here. Where are my images? I don't recall where I put them. I think I have images in here. Here we go. So I have these images. I'm going to put them in here. Okay, so now we have our images to look at. Okay, so now we need to create the class that will act as our servlet to manipulate our page here. So let's create a class. We'll just call it main servlet. Okay. And this is just going to extend HTTP servlet. Okay. And we're just going to use service here. We're not going to do get or do post on this, just for the simplicity of the demonstration. Okay. Import those. Okay. Now this, the purpose of this is we're supposed to grab whatever animal we clicked on. And from here, we could tell that the name of the select box is animals. And we can use the request to grab that parameter. So you can say the animal is from the request get parameter animals. So this equals that. Okay, so we get the animal. Now, if for some reason it's null, I don't want to do anything, so not null, then I can process stuff. Otherwise, if it does return null for some reason, I want to redirect it rather than throw an error. So from the response, I can just redirect it to any page I want. And I'm going to use the regular context and just send it to home, basically. For those who don't know, the context is the default path that it's running on. So for example, since I have Tomcat running on port 8080, it's going to be localhost :8080/servlets, because that's what I have for my context here. That's the path there. So it'll just automatically direct there. If it isn't null, then I just want to write to the screen. A lot of times you would want to redirect to another page, but this time I'm just going to grab the writer from the response, from the HTTP response, and just write to the page, basically write over everything and make it a new HTML page without redirecting. And I've already done the work here. It's just a simple HTML thing. Grab the writer first. Okay. The response that it passes in for us has a writer already. We can use that to write to the screen. For this form, I'm using back action. So when the button is clicked, I want it to call the back URL. And we're going to take care of that in a minute. So after that's finished, we're going to create our deployment descriptor. So we go here, we click new, and we click on standard deployment descriptor. It'll create a web XML form for us. Just hit finish. And this is where we define our servlets. Okay. We give it a servlet name. And we just call it animal servlet for this demonstration. We have a servlet class. And this will be the class of our main servlet, so it knows which class we're going to use. Oh, I want to redo that. Java class. I want to put it in a package. Servlets. Okay. Just copy this. Okay. All right. Apologize for that. Let's just delete this. Where's my delete? It's over here. Okay. Apologize about that. Okay, so with the class, we want to use servlets main servlet. And we don't have to put .java on there or anything. And then we need to create a mapping. so we know what servlet to use for which URL. Okay, and we just say the servlet name it's going to be the same name as the one up here. They have to correspond so it knows which one to use. And we have URL pattern. And we're going to say animal for one, and the other one was back. Back. So the animal is for this one, where we have the action of animal, and then for our class, we have the action of back. So we're going to have animal and back here as the URL patterns. It's going to see, oh, here's a URL pattern. What servlet name is that? Oh, it's that servlet? Okay. Well, it looks like this servlet uses this class. Okay, we're going to use that class. And then it searches for specific methods like to do get or do post or service, something like that to act. Okay, so once we have that set up, and I believe this is all set. Once we start this, I'm going to do debug so it automatically deploys a web page. Unless it's not. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we pull this up and we have our various options here. We have dog, cat, goat, panda. I'm going to choose cat, and when I hit submit, it goes to the cat. It does it right. And if I put a breakpoint here, it stops here. Because I have back, it's going to look at this and see, oh, for this pattern, I want to use this servlet. And so then it goes here, finds this method, and then calls it for us. And because animal is null, it's actually going to redirect us to our context path, which happens to be this. If I want, I can go to my index.html explicitly if I want, and it'll do that. Let's reset, go to our panda. We go back, it actually specifies index.html. So that's just the gist of it. It's not normal to write everything in HTML in the servlet itself, because this is kind of acting as a controller, and that's not very common. In Ben's example, when he used JSF, I'm actually using JSF here, and let me pull up my wrong one, WebXML. So this is a default WebXML that's generated when you choose JSF. It already creates a servlet with faces servlet name and the class that it's using. So, and this is the base URL here. You can see from my context, I have nothing. Never mind. Anything that has /main/ and then any file over here, it's going to use this servlet to build the page for you. And this is my default page right now that it's using. So typically, what I'm actually doing, I'm not reinventing the wheel, because instead of writing this, I could have said, oh, redirect to this page, but how do I make it specific to animal and animal? Okay, well then I have to learn that, but JSF will do it for you. This is an example of my login page. There's this annotation that you can use with JSF, and it links to the controller that you've defined, and when it loads, JSF will actually use, sorry, let me back up. Tomcat will use JSF to build the page for me using these classes that I've created. The servlet will call these classes to build the content for me so that I can see that. So anyways, that's my demonstration. Does anyone have any questions?
Nope, no questions. That was awesome.
Oh, super good. I'm definitely going to rewatch this when I'm working on this.
Cool. There are a lot of good YouTube videos about this. I can't remember the name of the guy. It's I don't have it up right now. I think I posted it previously on a forum, but if you just YouTube it, you can find some pretty good examples as well.
Awesome sauce.
Yep. So I'm done here. So yeah, I'm done.
Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
Awesome. I wanted to point out that I fixed the problem, and my get demonstration works now.
If you want to demonstrate that to us, that would be awesome.
Yep.
Basically, what it does is get the URL, and basically what it's doing is printing the raw HTML into right here. So this is what Google's search homepage looks like.
If you right-click and hit wrap text, it'll give you a big bunch of stuff in the middle of the page.
Yeah, soft wrap. That way you don't have to scroll.
Yeah, it's
a
bunch
of stuff.
Because all of it basically pulls the entire, all of the data. So all of the CSS, all of the HTML, all of the JavaScript.
It's fantastic. Though at least you have everything so you can parse through it using your own code so you know what you want to keep and what not.
Yep. Right here, title, Google. I just wanted to share that.
Excellent. That's awesome. I'm glad you got that working for us.
It turns out it wasn't any problem. There was no problem with my URL connection code. It was the URL itself was the incorrect way to URL search for kittens on Google.
We'll just say it's Google's fault.
Yeah, there it gets.
Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about?
So, Eric, were you using NetBeans for that demonstration?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Because I worked with IntelliJ a little bit today, and it's similar to NetBeans, so enough that I can work with it. But I have determined that I do not like it.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of good things. I haven't worked with IntelliJ a lot. I work with NetBeans for my job, so I'm most familiar with NetBeans. But I've heard IntelliJ is a lot better with capabilities with everything you want to do.
It has a cool Android plugin, which is why I was trying to use it, because I thought it was Android HTTPURLConnection, which is it's basically just doing it through a mobile app. That's what that means.
Right.
And I figured that building a whole mobile app just to demonstrate this functionality was a little bit overkill for basic.
Yeah, especially just for a demonstration. I feel like that'd be like an end of semester project that you put together or something.
James, you had the afternoon. You could have done it.
I mean, I did hammer out a 2-week-long project in 6 hours for CIT 336, but that was because it was not that complicated.
There is one thing about the IntelliJ. It makes Hibernate a little easier to get going. You can actually have it automatically import stuff from your database.
That's cool.
That is cool.
Like, there's a reason that Brother Tuckett used IntelliJ for that. And you can get the ultimate version with your BYUI email.
Yep.
And don't have to pay a dime. And there's a couple of good walkthrough videos. I think I posted one to the forums where the guy shows you how to import your database or any database, and it made it a lot less nightmarish.
That's good to know, because I plan on tackling Hibernate after we finish this meeting. So.
Yeah, me too. I was going to work on that next.
That said, I still don't really care for some of the other stuff about IntelliJ. It seems like it's got too many features that are not worth it.
So it's almost overwhelming with how much it can do and what you want to do.
I think it kind of slows stuff down.
My biggest complaint is that I cannot Control F, search for something, and then select all of them at once and replace all of them at once.
Yeah.
Like, I can't figure out how to do that with IntelliJ, and I use that all the time.
There's a way to do it because I did it today, but it was not intuitive. It wasn't just like 3 hotkeys and you're done. It was open up a contextual menu and do this jump.
That's IntelliJ's problem with contextual menus.
Like, it was way more quote unquote powerful than I thought it needed to be. I'm just like, what happened? Just find and replace. Just fix it.
Yeah. It's like strange and arcane, like Vim.
Oh no. It's not that bad. There is a Vim plugin though. I was looking for something else and I found how would I install that? Sorry. Way off topic, but I was just like
sounds like something I want to use.
Yeah.
I've known people that prefer Vim over any type of text editor. I'm just like, oh, you've worked way too long into it if you prefer it.
I was
like,
just like,
it's
yeah.
It requires like, I'm sure it's great for productivity if you get used to it and you like master all of the hotkeys and the mode switching and all that stuff. I'm sure it's fantastic, but I have a lot to like learn this semester, and Vim is not on my priority list.
I don't blame you.
If you do a bunch with like servers and stuff, it's worth learning a few things, but
yeah, if ever I'm on a Linux server, I use Vim for the editor, but if anywhere else, I'll use Notepad++ or something.
Yeah, anything's better than, well, not it's worse, but it's bad.
I actually have to use it to edit the Samba config file of my Plex server because it's a command line interface only.
Yep.
server. Oh, yeah.
That's exactly one of the few times where you have to use Vim.
Yep. Because Ubuntu's never heard of Emacs for some reason.
I've heard of Emacs, also Nano, but I don't think I've used any of them.
I like Nano a lot. It's the one that ships with Kali Linux.
I still like Sublime Text. I don't know. One of those things it's super fast and a billion hotkeys.
I like how Sublime Text can run off of a USB drive. I can just put it wherever I want. So whatever computer I'm on, I can always use Sublime Text.
Yeah. But yeah, everybody's got their favorite. But yeah.
That's a good hint about Hibernate and IntelliJ though.
Yeah, it actually made it where I kind of got it working. I'm just hoping I got it working enough where there's like, well, it works, you know.
Yeah. Like I'm still like hit or miss on exactly how much work and how much like in depth I need to go to get basic for each individual thing.
Have you turned anything in yet?
Yeah, I turned in collections, but that was like 300 lines of code. And then I turned in JSON, and I don't think he gave it to me. And it was like 150 lines of code, but it still did the thing. Like it still demonstrated like basic JSON functionality. So I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like they're pretty picky. I still haven't passed on MVC. I feel like I know it pretty well. I've given them my all the files saying, oh, this is my model, this is my controller, this is my view. And it's like obvious, but then they're like, well, how do they communicate with each other? And they won't pass me on it. So I got to do something more simple just with straight Java rather than JSF. I
have submitted my MVC like 3 times. And I have a control.
There we go.
This controls all of the menus. And I have my model, which is all of the different demonstrations in Vue, which outputs everything. Like everything that is output through Vue. So I don't understand why I don't have this yet. Like
Yeah, well, I feel like they're like extremely picky, and if they don't understand correctly, like I even tried spelling it out and I still didn't get it, and I was like, fine, I guess I'm not passing this one, you know. But yeah, I think I found an example on YouTube that doesn't use a web app to demonstrate the model view control thing. It's strictly just Java files. And it's basically using a Java Swing, I think, as the view, and then it has a controller and model and stuff. It's something very simple, but I'm thinking of turning that in.
You want me to? I turned it MVC and got basic on it. I can demo it real quick if you want to see what I turned in for it.
Actually, I would like that a lot.
Yeah, that'd work.
Let me take control here.
Ben is like the master of knowing exactly what the people want.
Right. We're trying to get too technical, like, oh yeah, we know what we're doing, and then they're like, what's going on here? I think if it requires too much brain power, maybe they just give up and oh, never mind.
Okay, you guys see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is my MVC demo. I just made a control class, and it's very basic. All right. So we're basically inputs. I'm just taking the inputs of, it's basically a calculator that's going to calculate interest on a loan. So it just takes the amounts. It's going to take them and send them over to the control layer, which is very, it is overly complicated to show MVC because you can obviously just send this over the control without ever using the model class. But I'm going to store the values. I'm going to set all this here.
And that's where you're using the model to store it.
Right. So you use the model, and then you go back to the input, and then it also is going to get the monthly payment, which is going to come out of the calculation, which goes ahead and does this. So that's just, and then this is just the classes that you're using. So you demo it, and it's strictly Java. It's not using anything else. Let's take out $200,000 for 30 years, not 300 years. Periods for year 12, interest rate 0.05, and it comes back and gives you a payment. And really, what this is the first crazy program. That first week, we turned in a basic command line Java program, and I dropped it and turned it into an MVC program. Basic on it, but it's just, it has the 3 different things, and then basically you just pull it up and run it. You have to drop all these in there to get them to run.
Yeah, that's the main class that opens the view.
Yep.
Right, and then the view uses the controller, and the controller uses the model, and then passes stuff back to the view. Yeah, it seems pretty self-explanatory to me.
Yep.
I think I just need to keep things simple because I'm overcomplicating things.
Yep. I may have overcomplicated my servlet one.
The storage closet, homie, and I'll mop your little ass up. Why did you take it? It's money.
I just took what he did and turned it into something else.
Oh yeah, it looks like you're printing your HTML from that. Yeah. So that's basically what I was doing, just with do post and do get instead of service.
Yep.
You realize that? Her hands are registered.
Oh, anyway.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, my suggestion. I've turned in, I don't know, 7 different things and got basic on them, and then I've been very basic on them. So.
Yeah, I've only gotten basic on everything. I think I have like 6 or 7 passed off.
I'm the little thieves that I didn't get more than basic on collections.
I don't think he's going to give us any more than basic on anything until we build a program with it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, because I was like, I think this demonstrates that I know a little bit more than basic on something.
Right.
But yeah, I'm gonna get to work.
Yep. Yeah, me too. Thanks for the demonstrations. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Good stuff, guys.